This is the Monitor Channel.
Kuwait has finally brought its hundreds of blazing oil wells under control. This week, firefighters expect to put out the last of more than 600 fires at wells set ablaze by Iraqi troops 8 months ago in the final days of the Gulf War. To gauge the aftermath of the fires, we're joined today by Professor Farouk El-Baz. He's director of the Center for Remote Sensing at Boston University. Good to have you back again. Back in the early days, when they first started working with the oil well fires, the progress was very slow, and there were expectations this was going to take a long time. Now suddenly the pace seems to have accelerated. Why were they able to put out all the fires so quickly?
When it all began, the Kuwaiti government decided that the people that they will bring in to put out the fires have to be people that have done this in the past, with known experience of putting oil wells. Actually, at the time, there were only 3 American companies and 1 Canadian company that could do that. So they did go, and at the very beginning, they used 4 teams, 1 each from this company, from each of the companies, and then they had to add some more, so they made 8, and then they tripled that, so they became 12 teams. But the progress was still slow. They didn't know how large the oil wells were, and it was very much unlike what they had before. So later, the government of Kuwait said, maybe we should not restrict this, and we'll open the door for anyone that thinks that they can put up oil wells. And today they have something like 27 teams working around the clock to do it.
How difficult and complicated is the task of putting out an oil well fire?
It is very difficult and very frightening and very dangerous. The first thing that you do, you have to cool off the area considerably by putting in a great deal of water. So in inland areas, they had to pump in water from the Gulf and pump it all the way and store it so that they can use enormous amounts of water to put on the fire itself, so they can cool the fires, the area around it a little bit.
But pouring on the water doesn't put out the fire.
No, it just cools the area and cools the fire itself. So lowers the temperature of the fire so that they can approach it close enough so that they can put something on top of the fire and explode it. And the explosion will make the air in a vacuum nearly, so it will, in that one instant, there will be no oxygen, so the fire itself would stop.
Snuffs out the fire.
Yes. Then they will have to approach it a little further after a few days or sometimes a week. And then they will take away all of the junk that was at the tip of the well, so that they can cap it, so stop the flow of oil.
Well, now that they are putting out all the fires at all of these hundreds and hundreds of wells in Kuwait, does that mean that Kuwait is ready to start full production again?
No, far from that. Actually, there were 732 oil wells that were destroyed. Most of them were caught fire. About 40 were destroyed but did not catch fire. So these oil wells were pouring oil all the time. Now, after you cap the well in this process, most of the wells will not be able to use them again because of the tremendous damage that occurred because of this release of pressure. So in some cases, they have to re-drill wells into the same fields to get the oil out. However, right now they have found a few oil wells that they can bring in a little bit of oil for local use. So they are now using oil in a refinery, in one part of the refinery that they can use at least locally.
What about the environmental impacts from all of this? There was great concern when the fires began. Has the environmental impacts turned out to be as bad as everyone feared?
There were 2 things to that. The first one is that the doomsday sayers that said that all of this soot is going to go in the upper atmosphere and it will cover the whole earth and will give us a nuclear winter and this and that, didn't really know about the oil well fires themselves, did not know about the products, and actually did not know about the direction of wind in this particular part of the world, which is from the north to south. So they assumed that this junk is going to go to Europe and then move over to the upper layers of the equator, from the equator all the way to the North Pole and all of that. And that didn't really happen. However, the other part is that in addition to the oil well fires, we have this oil spill, and we also have the disruption to the land, so there is a great deal of environmental damage to Kuwait and the region that will affect the whole region.
Professor El-Baz, is your Center for Remote Sensing playing an active part in helping the government in Kuwait to gauge or assess the environmental damage?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we have had Kuwaiti scientists visit us and discuss with us what satellite images can do. And this past week, I received a message from the Kuwait Institute for Scientific Research asking us to make a program so that we can study what did happen to the terrain. Now it is time to figure out what really did happen. So they want to find out what did happen due to these environmental disasters and map the regions that have been affected, particularly by oil leaks and things like that, using satellite images, which we are going to do with them.
Well, I know you're just in the process now, but has there been a great deal of oil spilled all over the desert in that part of the world?
Enormous amounts, and actually today we have a whole new physical presence on Earth that is called oil lakes. These are vast areas that on the surface that are covered by oil. Some of them are 3 to 4 feet deep. So these are not water lakes, but oil lakes. So we have to map these, find where they are, how much oil may be in there, and what to do with it.
Has there ever been, obviously this whole area sits on vast pools of oil deep underground. Has there ever been a situation where that oil bubbled up before in the past without wells?
Never like that. And some tiny little seepages and so on, like in Iran, but never in these such enormous amounts.
I know it's all a terrible catastrophe from the standpoint of people in the region, but are there any useful lessons that you think can be learned from this whole experience, from a scientific standpoint?
I think a great deal. First of all, we have now this business of the oil well fighters. We have an enormous number of people that can do this now. They have had the experience, they can do it, and they can do it fast under very severe conditions. In addition, we also have the knowledge now of what the oil spill might do to the water in the Gulf. So there is a great deal that has been learned collectively to work in a region, and also for the international scientific community to pour in and help the situation.
Farouk El-Baz, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And coming up, kids sending a message to kids.